Welcome to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and I am thrilled to share with you information about resiliency, well-being, performance, education, business, parenting, and everything in between. I'm committed to joining you each week to talk about these big ideas and bring them into action, habits, tools, strategies, tactics that allow us to finally uncover what it takes to truly be well. And I'm just so excited that you're here. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and today I thought we could take a deep dive into the idea of happiness. So recently I was working with a large group and there was like hundreds of them. And a person asked me this question. They said, wow, you just by nature must be such a happy person. Like watching you do your thing, like you just kind of operate. They say, I follow you on social media. You always just look so happy. You must have been born happy. Now, this gave me so much to think about. And we had a very interesting conversation about happiness and what that looks like and how we cultivate happiness practices. And I really wanted to bring some of that learning and those insights to the show today. So thank you for joining me for a conversation about happiness. When we think about happiness, I first think that there's a wee bit of, well, not a wee bit, there is a whole bunch of misinformation about happiness, and that's being kind of like the goal of life. I don't believe the goal of life is to be happy. I know personally an area that I strive for is a feeling of deep contentment. That is when people are talking about happiness, where my brain goes. For me, I look at it as a sense of really deep, enriched contentment, that I feel peace, I feel settled. It's not the happy, like bouncing all around in unicorns and sparkles and that kind of stuff, which again, there's a time and a season for that. But when people talk about, wow, Robyne, you seem so happy, I really think what they're seeing is that I'm in a particular season right now where I'm feeling very content. I'm feeling very satisfied. I feel a sense of just sufficiency in all of those 8 realms of well-being. Now, to start this kind of taking a deeper dive and learning a little bit more about happiness, just so again, I wanted to clarify that difference of that contentment versus happy. When we are talking about happiness, I find it fascinating that there's really good research that discusses the notion that about 50% of happiness is genetic. I just think that is so useful to recognize it's not all or nothing. There is approximately 50% that is genetic, which means that we have these predispositions to particular temperaments, to particular conditions, emotional conditions, mental health experiences, whatever that might be. About 50% is going to be genetic. 10% is life circumstances. Okay. So again, it's like what is happening immediately in this moment. Life happenstance is about 10%, and 40%, the research says, is up to choice. 40% is choice, personal agency. Now, why I think that is so helpful is even that 50% genetics, it isn't like it's 0 or 50. There's going to be variations along the way. So there might be somebody who perhaps, because of their genetic makeup, they might experience more difficulty sustaining positive, energetic mood, but it doesn't mean it's like 0 or 50. So there's going to be space there. But what I love is that 40% of this is up for grabs. 40% means that I have full agency to be able to make decisions, to be able to create habits, routines, rituals, practices that allow me to experience contentment or this idea of happiness. Now, another just full disclosure piece that I want to share is I also believe that the reason I'm able to hold a feeling of content is because I also hold deep grief. I'm barely holding on most of the time because of grief and of a sense of deep loss to my primary attachment person, which was my mother. So I feel like because I'm constantly chronically sad and feeling loss, it really put me in a position where I had to really take control of that 40% so that way they can coexist. And things can coexist. We can have dual truths. I can live in a chronic state of grief, and at the same time, I'm able to enjoy deep satisfaction, deep excitement, and again, happiness and joy. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Now, there was a season, though, where I wasn't able to hold both. I hadn't learned yet how to work and carry my grief. And as I said before on this podcast, that grief rewrites us. Our grief changes our biology, it changes our psychology. Physiologically, we are different after a grief episode. And just last week, I was connecting with a group in Toronto of senior leaders, and I made reference to the fact that grief rewrites us. And a gentleman came up to me after and he said, "You know, I lost my wife when I was very young. She was very, very young. I was very young, and I lost my wife." And he said, "Until you said grief rewrites us," he said, "I didn't even realize that my life was divided in a before and after, when she was alive and then when she wasn't alive." And we had a beautiful conversation about grief. And I'll tell you, conversations about grief, oh my goodness, I just, they are so sacred. So when anyone shares with me conversations about their loved ones, oh gosh, just so you know, like I feel so fortunate to be able to hold space and be in community when somebody's sharing with me those losses and that pain, but also how these people lived and what they meant to one another. I believe this also. I believe this idea as well that, you know, grief and the depth of the grief is a testament to how much we love them. So again, grief is a whole other piece. But when we think about happiness, you might be wondering, Robyne, why are we talking about grief? Well, I think the people who are able to experience happiness in spite and despite of what they've navigated is part of the practice. And that's where that 40% comes from. Now, from biological level, to kind of stay on that, we know that there are happiness hormones. There are hormones in our body that actually allow us to feel good. So dopamine. Dopamine is an example. We also know that there's oxytocin, which is the love hormone. We get that when we pet puppies. And yes, sidebar, Navy and Memphis are giving lots of oxytocin to our family right now, and even our neighbors and anyone who comes across them. They are little oxytocin dealers. They are just throwing out the good vibes wherever these puppies are out and about and what they're doing. 12 weeks old now, Navy and Memphis, and things are well. So, okay, so those are the oxytocin. It's the love hormone. It's that smell that's invoked when we are with a baby. Babies help us release oxytocin. Even looking at a picture of a family vacation or something that gives you a sense of fondness, that's going to release the oxytocin. The dopamine is kind of what we call the doing happy hormone. So it's like putting something in your cart, okay? Like online shopping is good, digital, maybe a little dirty dopamine. But again, even just the act of buying something, acquiring something, finishing something. Now, not all check marks are equal. Some of them will release more dopamine, but the body will take what it can get. So hence why we sometimes do procrastinating behavior to go after the quick dopamine hits, because the deeper dopamine, although it will last longer, we usually have to work harder for it. Okay, so we have oxytocin, we have the dopamine, we also have the serotonin, which is like sun, nature, it's outdoors, movement. That's the serotonin that gets pumping through our system. And then we also have a little bit of the endorphins, the outdorphins. Some people call it when we get outside, outdorphins. Really, it's this kind of idea about endorphins, which is through big movement. So that would be like a massive house clean where you are like not quite rage cleaning perhaps, but when you're really in it, you're moving around, and then afterwards it's like so satisfying. I still remember one time doing a massive house clean, and I remember the kids were little, and I go through this kind of notion where all of a sudden I hit these walls where there's just too much stuff and I have to like put things up in donations. And I remember one time Ava yelled like, "Grab a pet." I'm like, "Hey, I have never donated a pet yet." But they literally were like, "Quick, grab and, shelter in place," kind of thing, when I went on a wee bit of a rampage, tidying things up. I digress. Back on it. So the endorphins are through big movement. So that would be like running, a big workout. There's also a wee bit of research that's showing that endorphins are released during hot exposure. So through saunas, we're getting some endorphins there. But it's the exercise. Thinking about kind of like the exercise, the big movement. So, our bodies essentially are these wee little pharmacies, and we are able to invoke those happiness hormones. Now, this is where the genetic component comes in, where some people aren't able to access them or have them sustain as long. But the reality is, we are able to cultivate them. So, practices and actions that are going to bring more opportunities for that oxytocin, the endorphins, the serotonin, and the oxytocin. So, those are the happiness hormones. Now, the other piece about happiness, when we look at the research, there are a few common threads: purposeness, a sense of purpose-filledness, the fact that what we do matters, this idea of meaningfulness, that really helps contribute to us feeling a sense of contentment or happiness. Now, if we're doing, for example, a job that on the surface doesn't look like it's purpose driven, like it doesn't look like this is like we're not saving baby dolphins, we're not changing the world. It's just like, oh, really, there's no purpose there. That's a bit of a misnomer, because if your purpose is to providing for your family and you're doing this, task that from the outside looking at it says like that's not really purpose driven, but it is if it's fulfilling the purpose of you being able to support your loved ones, for you being able to provide for your family. So that job is purposeful. So it doesn't mean we all have to move out to doing mission work and again, saving rainforests. Like it's not necessarily about that. It's that this job is allowing me to stay value aligned. The other idea here is meaningfulness, that we're able to find meaning not in necessarily like everything has a meaning, but again, giving meaning and purpose to things. One of the expressions that gets me so cheesed is the idea that everything happens for a reason. No, not everything happens for a reason. Some things just suck. Some things are just absolutely awful. Not everything happens for a reason. However, I do believe that we can learn things. But I didn't have to go through that thing to be able to learn it. I could have learned it other ways. But it's like when you're standing there in the blast radius of your hopes and your dreams or whatever it was that you're wishing for and loving, and all of a sudden you lose that. You can't tell me that happened for a reason, but we can learn something from it and we can move forward. Okay. We don't get over things, but we can carry those lessons forward. We don't want to waste a mistake. We don't want to miss an opportunity. But again, not everything happens for a reason. So when we talk about the notion of meaning, when we talk about the idea of meaning, it's meaningful to me. It's meaningful in terms of the lens in which I see the world. So, for example, meaningful is that I can create, let's say when, Hunter's coming home for the weekend from university, I can create a meal which could be really meaningful. Right. So I will definitely have mashed potatoes in there because Hunter, like that is one of his like go-to, like my mom loves me when she makes me mashed potatoes. Don't even know where that narrative came from, but he picked it up when he was little that like my mom really loves me when she makes mashed potatoes. So darn well I'm going to be making some mashed potatoes for that kid. We create meaning behind it. It's the same as, when I make my late mom's, her autumn vegetable soup from the milk calendar. I don't know if people even remember the milk calendar. The Milk Canada used to put out a calendar every year, and there was this one recipe. It's one of my mom's favorites. When I make it, it gives me a sense of connection, and it's meaningful to me. So to somebody else, if I was to say, hey, make the soup, it's going to make you happy because there's meaning in it, maybe. But for the majority of people, it wouldn't land that way because they don't have that personal narrative that's braided throughout. So that's the meaning that we put on things. The other idea, and I love this concept, and I will track down the scholar who talked about this. I remember reading it years ago. But when he was doing his research on happiness, his argument was we want to diversify our happiness, meaning that it's not just one thing that brings us happiness. We want to have pockets and ponds of happiness all around us. So I want you to fall in love with parts of your work, but that not being the only thing that you love. I want you to fall in love with times of rest and recovery. But again, that not being that we, live for the weekends or we live for our holidays. I want you to fall in love with, again, things external like music and again, it's hobbies. And it's so fascinating if you just pause and you kind of look at the industrial revolution. And I just think it's so fascinating that so many things that we call hobbies right now, like gardening, playing music, baking, decorating, painting, things that we call hobbies now, those were actually jobs 100 years ago, right? Isn't that interesting? I think it's very interesting that things that we call hobbies now, 100 years ago, were actually jobs, right? You would have even farther back, the jester, the musician, the artist, the baker, the blacksmith. Anyway, clearly I digress again. Okay, so the idea is to diversify our happiness. And a way I think that we can diversify our happiness is when we recognize that we will never have enough of what we do not need. I'll say it again because that's important. We will never have enough of what we do not need. There will never be enough. Like we will never have that feeling of sufficiency or that feeling of abundance. We'll always be in a place of scarcity if we're trying to fill ourselves up with things that actually aren't what we need. Are you ready to receive? I appreciate that people are giving and doing and outputting like in such a big way right now. And it's contributing to our burnout on a significant level. And what I'm excited to tell you about on July 8th for our next iteration of our Stress Wisely Labs, this is all about learning to receive. Opening yourself up to the opportunity for recovery, for rest, for renewal, using the season of summer to receive all of the good that is out there so that way you can feel well resourced, be ready and steady for whatever comes your way. So again, the next iteration of our Stress Wisely Labs is just around the corner, and we are about filling you back up with energy, good ideas, research-informed practices that will help you make the most of the beautiful season that is summer. And we've saved you a seat. I'm looking forward to having you there. Please check out the website for all of the information and know that this is the time where you get to get that bucket filled back up so we can continue to do the good work for ourselves and for others. So July 8th, I'll see you there. I look forward to our time together. Bye for now. So when we think about diversifying it, it's not just of acquiring more. It's about being able to appreciate and savor what you have and being able to like really find that contentment with what is right here, right now in front of you. I know about probably, I guess it was about 8 months ago, I had this wild unlock in my brain where I realized that I had accomplished things in my life, personally and professionally. I had accomplished some really big goals personally and professionally that I had in my mind decided would make me happy. So, but then I realized, okay, yeah, they made me happy for a time, of course, but it's like I should be happy. I should feel content because I've already achieved the things that I said were going to make me happy. So that gave me this unlock because I realized it's achieving the things isn't what makes you happy. It's the process. It's about having some direction. It's about working towards things that I actually find bring the deepest sense of getting to know myself, understanding my strengths, understanding my weaknesses, and again, just getting clarity on what it is that matters most and making what matters most matter most. Again, I just really encourage you to kind of invite this idea that we would have already been happy if getting that thing was going to make us happy. Right? You would have already felt deep contentment if you've achieved that thing. So again, that brings us back to that 40% is up to us. It's a decision. And I often talk about this idea that, it's hard to stay the same and it's hard to change. We get to pick our heart. Do we want to be in that place of evolution where we're learning and we're growing and we're expanding versus that place of kind of, digging in and feeling a wee bit resistant to change and kind of doing the things we've always done, trying to kind of get something different? There's that expression that I've used before. And again, I still don't know if it's socially appropriate to say it, but the idea that even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while, even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. And I really believe that a deep sense of happiness and contentment, I do believe it comes down to intention and by design. It's not going to happen by chance. It's not going to just fall in your lap one day that all of a sudden you feel satiated and happy and just so satisfied. It's an act. It's an action. It's something that we have to do to, again, be present to what's happening around us. Okay, so those are some big ideas, but like let's get really particular on okay, what does that actually look like? What's the how to it? What I think makes a really big difference right now with the current state of the world and allowing yourself to be happy or content is first and recognize that you can have dual truths. The world can be unwell and you are allowed to be well. Right now, I think people are trying to dim their light. They're trying to be like, oh my gosh, how can I be happy when the state of the world looks like this? It's okay to be both. It's okay to be aware of what's happening in the world and also fall in love with your life. Just be deeply connected to things that matter most to you. That's absolutely okay. The other gentle invitation here is to notice, where do you keep repeating the same mistakes? Where do you keep repeating the same lessons that you are not picking up on? Because we repeat what we do not repair. Now, there was a quote that I came across a wee while ago on social media, and it said that uncommunicated expectations, so uncommunicated expectations are premeditated resentments. Oh my gosh. I believe it was Chris Wilkes that said that. Unexpressed expectations are premeditated resentments. So it's like you're like cheesed before you're even cheesed, right? Like it's like premeditated getting upset with someone if we're not talking about our expectations. What that has to do with this conversation is this idea about we repeat what we don't repair. But if we don't communicate our expectations, then we have this like premeditated resentment. We're going to end up in these kind of emotional traps. And I know just recently I put out an invitation and the invitation to get together with a group and the invitation, I hit the stone wall, which happens often. I had a moment where I realized I hadn't actually expressed my expectation. I didn't actually say, hey, it would mean a lot to me if you could show up with me and my family, we could celebrate this thing. I didn't express that. It was more just like, hey, are you available to join us for this celebration? And I got it. No, too busy. Okay, fine. But the reality is, I hadn't expressed how important it was to me for them to be there. And then what was interesting when I realized, wow, I haven't even expressed this, I did that. And then I got the no. Okay, cool. I'm done. Right. So again, this is one of those things where to be able to hold that sense of happiness and contentment, we got to learn the lessons, my friends. Like we have to take the lesson. So when we've met the lesson multiple times, like we have to decide, okay, are we going to actually listen? And I've shared this before that sometimes there's some unlearning that has to happen. And, being mindful about, seeking out approval, for example, of someone who is not perhaps skilled enough to be able to give you that approval. Or also, if this is a person you wouldn't go to for advice, why would you go to them for approval? Okay, now that's my third solid digression in our episode. Bear with me. Let's get back to what makes us happy. What can we do? I want you to have your go-to things that we know elevate your mood. So again, what are some of your go-tos? I would encourage you to have your go-to playlist of music that you can listen to when you just want to like stop adulting, stop carrying the weight of the world, where you can just be you, your favorite self, whatever that looks like. So listening to music. Just recently, I had a chance to have some friends visiting from out of town. Shout out to Jill and Nick. We got to go see James Blunt. And for people who know my very random music taste, James Blunt is up there in my top 10. I tell you, I was so excited at that concert. And it was at Massey Hall. It's a small venue, like 3,500 people. James Blunt comes out on stage and I literally am like shaking. I am so excited. And I turn to my friends and I'm like, it's James effing Blunt. Like I am finally in the same space as this person. And I had such a special time listening to that music. I love live music. Again, it's this idea that like I savored the moment, right? Savoring the moment, whether it's a concert, whether it's your first cup of coffee in the morning, savor it. Just like marinate in how much you enjoy it, how much you love it. And starting your day or bringing in things that you love that are so idiosyncratic to you and just appreciating them and being present for it, it feels really amazing. Now, on that note about appreciation, just yesterday, I was talking to a group and they said they thought appreciation was like a little bit like overdone, that it was like a hype cycle, that like really, like, does it really make that big of a difference being appreciative? It is not a hype cycle. Appreciation is a way of being. It's operating from this place of humility. It's operating from this place that I think of deep values of recognizing that, things are, this matters. This is really, really good. Do you know, it's funny, the one and only Phil M. Jones, he has this kind of expression that he uses where he talks about like the value of things and appreciating things. And he makes this kind of reference that, like, how much is this like pink floating unicorn thing worth to you? Would you pay $1,000 for this raft, this pink floating unicorn raft? Would you pay $1,000 for it? And, most of us would say, no, I would not pay $1,000 for a floating pink unicorn raft. And then he says, well, what happens if you're on a boat and it's sinking? How much would you pay for that floating raft? $1,000 seems like a steal. Again, it's the savoring and creating value in the things in the moment. So whether it be, taking 5 minutes to practice a wee bit of solitude, just to practice a few minutes of reflecting and just grounding, add value to that. So it's not just a, oh, it'd be nice to meditate or it'd be nice to have some solitude. It's like, oh, I can't afford not to take a moment and experience it, to enjoy this. So again, that idea of savoring, giving, and adding value because you decide, which ties into the meaning in this idea of purpose. The last kind of idea on this to kind of land this plane, as I've noticed I seem to say quite often in these podcasts, is this idea about kind of reimagining what, again, contentment feels like for you without having to explain it to anybody else. I think there's so often, you look at these highlight reels on social media and it's like, oh, I would be happy if I was doing this thing, or I'd be happy if I was doing that thing. Yeah, maybe we all want to be invited to that party, but none of us really want to go, I think, because again, it's like actually doing it your way, being open to doing it your way. And I think that being able to share with a small group of people and being able to be in community with that small group of people, having people in your corner, like that feels really good. And I think that actually feels better than some of these big hype things that we see about everybody else. And it looks like everybody else is in these massive groups and these tribes and doing all these crazy wild things. It's like doing the few little things that are sacred to you with a few of those sacred friendships or sacred relationships that you have, and just savoring it and appreciating it is, to me, that's priceless. Now, one last little note, because again, I want to always make sure that this is useful. I want to encourage you to, if you are looking for ways to bring in some gratitude, which will help with contentment and happiness, this practice, I've used this before, I talk about it often, it's habit stacking. So if we want to get a new behavior into our repertoire, pairing it with the behavior you already have is a definite way to do it. Habit stacking is a go-to. Where I built my deep gratitude practice actually was because I habit stacked gratitude with drinking coffee. So every time I would pick up a coffee cup, and a little shout out to Hunter for bringing me back a Super Mario Princess Peach coffee cup for folks who are watching this. Every time I pick up a cup of coffee, I take a moment and I say, what are 3 new things that I'm grateful for today? I don't want to be on autopilot and just say like my faith, my family, blah, blah, blah. Like it's like a laundry list. Like you want, obviously I'm very grateful for those things, but what are 3 new, novel, just things that you're noticing that you're grateful for today? So every time I pick up a coffee, I take a moment and I say, what are 3 new things I'm grateful for? Now, I remember one time when Jackson was a little bit little. He was little. There was a time that Jackson was little, but I mean, when he was younger. And Jackson said to me, he goes, Mama, you're the only person I know who says grace over coffee. And I paused and I thought, okay, that's weird. We say grace over meals as a practice in our family. But I'm like, dude, I don't say grace over coffee usually. He goes, no, you do. Mommy, it's so obvious. You like pick up a coffee, even when we're going through the drive-through, and you get it. And then you pause. You kind of like take a moment and then you smile and then you start to drink it. It's like you say grace over coffee. And I'm like, oh, Jax, that's not me saying grace over coffee. That's me saying 3 new things that I am grateful for. I call to mind 3 new things that I just appreciate so much and I give thanks for it. And Jack said, Mama, isn't that grace? Well, yeah, Jax, it is. So maybe I do say grace over my coffee. My friends, I hope the takeaway for you here, that there was one takeaway for you here, but the one that I do really hope you see is that there's a huge component of agency in choosing to find things that you're happy about. You're choosing to find things that bring you a deep sense of contentment, a feeling of sufficiency. There is a genetic component to this 100%, and lifestyle, life circumstances, that plays into it as well. But there is so much more within our control when it comes to our happiness than I think we give ourselves credit for or we are aware of. And the reality is, if we're focusing on what's outside of our control all the time, we're losing the power to operate on the things that are within our control. I'll say that one again because it's important. When we're focusing on those external things outside of our control, we are surrendering an area where we could have agency with the things that are within our control. And I'll tell you, if you can sway the deck by 40%, those are pretty good odds. So I hope you can find something today that brings you a sense of contentment, a feeling of just savoring some little moment, whatever that is. And please share it with me. Tag me, share it with me, DM me. I want to know where you can find just the little micro burst of something that brings you joy, whatever that might be. My friend Peter Katz calls these joy snacks. So let's fill up the emails today and some social media with some joy snacks. Friends, thank you for listening. Take good care and tune in next time for the next episode of Resiliency Redefined. I'm so glad you came today. Bye for now. Thank you for spending time with this podcast episode today. I hope you found something helpful in Resiliency Redefined. Please feel free to share it with somebody who you might think could benefit. Maybe there was something useful, something in particular that you think you could pay forward. Also, if you have a moment, please feel free to rate and review this podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcast. It means the world to me. And again, thanks for your time. Thank you for your interest. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.